Alright, let's get a few things out of the way from jump. Today's trucks are impressive machines that are head and shoulders above the half-ton trucks of only a decade ago. But just because Chevy has improved their trucks doesn't mean they don't have their flaws. I don't want to focus on aesthetic flaws because this is all about function over form, but some of the aesthetic flaws on this truck are pretty glaring. This is everything wrong with the 2018 Chevrolet Silverado LT. I'm going to read you a quote GM Chief Engineer Jeff Luke gave to Jalopnik about this truck. Quote, "The steering column of the K2XX lineup is approximately 3 degrees off straight on center. Essentially, if you were sitting in the driver's seat looking at the steering wheel, the column is rotated slightly left. This results from carryover components from previous generation trucks." End quote. Or at least that's how the story goes. Now, take a second to let that sink in. The statement is the embodiment of everything wrong with GM today. It blows my mind that GM found it acceptable to carry over a steering column from a previous generation truck with the full knowledge that it didn't fit with the, quote, all new generation. The way I look at it, there are two possibilities. 1. Either GM went forward with the full knowledge that they were installing an ill-fitting steering column, or 2. They didn't notice the column was off-center until after they were too far into development and decided to go with it. Either way, it doesn't look good. And once you see it in the column, it's impossible not to notice it's off-center. While we're on the interior, this truck, an LT with a 5.3-liter V8, doesn't come with a towing brake package. This was a factory option even for the lower trim models, at least on the 2016 Silverados, but it didn't carry over into the 2018s. So because of this, you have to get an aftermarket controller installed if you plan on towing anything, and they always look like crap. The mirrors don't extend out, also an issue if you plan to tow. Alright, back to the interior. Let's talk about the elephant in the room for anyone who's driven one of these trucks. This interior is, well, it's crap. The material used in the dash components and buttons appear to be made out of recycled plastic bottles. You know those park benches made from plastic bottles? Yeah, it's the same quality. The radio display is not crisp, and display quality doesn't match the higher quality of the dash cluster display. It's just not aesthetically pleasing. When compared to the competition, Chevy is worlds behind with this truck's interior, especially the seats. And let me be fully transparent. I've owned over 100 cars and trucks of all makes, models, and years, but I do not work for the big three or an auto supplier, and I have no horse in this race. Objectively speaking, and I mean that strictly objectively speaking, these seats provide next to no support, they lack bolstering, and they're incredibly stiff. Alright, this full-size truck has a comically small back seat, and the seating position is straight up and down. It is like sitting on a park bench back here. Have you ever picked up one of those blue Walmart or Meijer recyclable bags? The ones for $1 that you're supposed to take home with you and take back to the store every time, but in reality it's going to sit in a bag drawer at your home? It appears that Chevy made these seats out of the exact same material. I could not imagine driving this truck daily, let alone driving it across the country with these seats. This 5.3-liter small block has 355 horsepower and 383 pound-feet of torque, but this truck weighs over 5,200 pounds. Again, we're not going to compare this truck to previous generations, and the 0 to 60 in this truck is around 6 seconds, which is pretty damn fast for a 2.5-ton truck. It's not that this truck feels underpowered, but man, the handling on this truck is just not great. The steering feels sloppy, and I don't know, maybe it's the electric assist power steering, but you don't feel in control at any speed. It's a bit unnerving, and I couldn't imagine pulling a lot of weight with this truck. You just don't feel in control. Alright, these last few items are some pet peeves of mine about the Chevy Silverado. For one, the wheel arches. Just take a look at how the wheel arches of Chevy's CK and Silverado line has evolved over the last 2 decades. Chevy keeps squaring off the wheel arches. It just doesn't look great to me. 2. What the hell is the point of having these steps in the bumper? It's not aesthetically pleasing, and has anyone actually used them? I literally know of no one ever using these. They just don't look good. Why waste the money on this, Chevy? 3. And this isn't specific to Chevrolet, but if you want a new hood, it's going to cost you a couple grand. Aluminum hoods are incredibly expensive. So the question is, should you buy it? Well, do you remember your first car? Do you remember that feeling you had for the first few weeks or months in it? You had freedom, you had independence, but most importantly, it was yours. It didn't matter that there were coffee stains all over it and it smelled like an ashtray. You ignored the fact that it was teal green and the heat didn't work. The seats were worn from hundreds of thousands of miles of abuse from countless prior owners. The driver's side window didn't work, so every time you went through the drive through, you had to open the door up and reach over and hand money to the cashier. But none of that mattered, because this was your car. But then the novelty of it wore off. It's 2006 and your friend has a brand new 2005 Mustang. And wow, that thing rides so much better than your 1990s Ford Tempo. Envy hits you. Your mind's been opened. You realize all the other options out there, all the better options. That's the feeling you get from this truck.